I mean, that's massive compared to like a 5% increase.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think on one of the second pages here, you go into expenditure categories, and I think that's where you get some of the more scary statistics coming into it, and they start off right at the top with a massive one where buildings insurance costs have increased by 92% since 2019 to 2024. Yeah. Huge. I mean, building values went up massively, didn't they? Around the time of COVID, that's had a big impact on it.
And people don't consider the knock-on effect of the valuation of a building when you get inflation, because contractors will put their prices up. They'll be looking at the build methodology. So is parking easy? Are there properties next door? What are those properties worth? How difficult is it going to be? Are you in a conservation area? All those kind of factors, they just all increase because of the inflationary impact on things. So, and more parking restrictions and ULEZ zones and all that kind of stuff will put up prices as well. Right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm here today with Lachlan or Lachlan. I don't know. You can tell us how you pronounce it.
Lachlan.
And we're going to be looking at the Property Institute's report about service charge. It's from April 2024, but it's a PDF document. You can go to their website, download that, and have a look at it yourselves. But yeah, basically, it's kind of a document about service charge and the increases of them, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, since 2019. So that's right before COVID, obviously, where everything started to go a little bit mental from there. So I think it's very good. Yeah, inflation, Brexit hit. Since then, we've had utility prices and all sorts go up since. So really glad that someone's done some statistics on it. So when you tell people these things as a property manager, you've got some data to back it up.
Yeah,
which helps.
Because the data suggests that obviously it's gone up quite considerably. You've got, I think, 0.1 on the total service charge budgets is 2019 average service charge 2,523. 2024 average service charge 3,600. So an increase of £1,000, which is approximately about 30% on the 2019 prices.
Yeah, massive, absolutely massive. They dig into the detail of it quite a lot as well with this document as well, which is quite good, and it gives you a split between above 18 metres and below 18 metres, which of course is particularly relevant since the Building Safety Act came out as well, 2022, 2023. So it gives a good overview of how costs have increased overall. I think it's very good as a tool to help explain in broad strokes where the increases have come through to clients, to help them understand that. As with any piece of data, that it's got its limitations somewhat in it, but I think it can help to describe exactly where trends have gone, exactly where they're going up, and particularly when it comes to budget setting, it can help to sort of encourage some of those additional costs which we keep having to put in, unfortunately, or suggest forward to them.
Yeah, because I've noticed, obviously I don't get too involved with the budget setting or the kind of day-to-day stuff. You're more on the front line than me. But a lot of people obviously are concerned about costs and rising costs, and they keep going up. It's quite regular that the budget's gone up by like 10, 15%, and that the RPI figures, for instance, or the inflationary figures are a lot lower than that. So I think there's an important thing for people to consider the kind of real world inflation. So you might see the government figures at 5%, for example, but actually when you go into like B&Q and you buy like a length of wood or a pack of screws or whatever, and the pack of screws was, I don't know, £1, and now it's £1.75. That's that's massive compared to like a 5% increase.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, significantly so. I think on one of the second pages here, you go into expenditure categories, and I think that's where you get some of the more scary statistics coming into it, and they start off right at the top with a massive one where buildings insurance costs have increased by 92% since 2019 to 2024. Huge. I mean, building values went up massively, didn't they? Around sort of COVID, that's had a big impact on it.
And people don't consider the knock-on effect of the valuation of a building when you get inflation, because contractors will put their prices up. They'll be looking at the build mythology. So is parking easy? Are there properties next door? What are those properties worth? How difficult is it going to be? Are you in a conservation area? All those kind of factors, they just all increase because of the inflationary impact on things. So, and more parking restrictions and ULEZ zones and all that kind of stuff will put up prices as well.
Yeah, it certainly will.
Making those rebuild costs even higher than they were. But 92%, well, that's pretty eye-watering, isn't it?
It's horrific. Yeah. I think it'll be slightly skewed towards some of the high-rise buildings as well. High-rise buildings, I think, within that figure will have a much higher percentage increase. Obviously, as cladding has become more of a concern and some more and more safety measures are required as part of it. So I think the insurance cost and the insurance risk to them has certainly gone up too.
I think that's right, but actually, to be fair, in the asterisks at the bottom underneath the sheet, it does say 58 of the 50 blocks were over 18 metres. So there is a proportion in these figures that aren't high rises. Grantably, that's well over half of the buildings that they looked at the budgets were high rise in this particular bit, but they've got sections where they exclude high rises, i.e. 18s and below. So, utility costs and up 73%, professional fees 69%, health and safety costs 40%, on and on it goes really. Management agent fees up 20%, 21%. So it's one of the lower things, but still an increase. That's always good for us to say, isn't it?
So it's good to note as well with all these figures that the actual average inflation rate across this period was set at 23%. So if you view that as sort of a baseline, then anything above that you can see is an increase further than just standard day-to-day life. So management fees are actually under.
Yeah, better put our prices up.
Don't say that.
But inflationary against that though, and of course any business is no different to ours, where you have to keep pace with the market and pay people properly, and our costs go up. We won't be immune to utility costs increasing, rent, materials that we buy, printer, ink, and heating, lighting, all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty makes for fairly grim reading for the most part. But I suppose one of the things, as I mentioned, that I notice is a lot of people giving backlash about the budgets and the rest of it, and not really fully understanding that. I mean, you're much more open to that than I am. Yeah,
it's difficult because everyone's very mindful that we're in a cost of living crisis, that we've had all these increases and everything, and utilities and everything. Everyone brings that back, but every single time there's been sort of a significant change in the economy over the last few years or something that's notable, property hasn't been excluded from it. It's been directly impacted by it almost every single time. Value's gone up, it's affected insurances. Brexit, you get materials over from Europe, that increases. Again, cost of labour's increased, utilities. You have utility costs for common ways. You have electricity, some of gas, some of water. All of these things, they have had direct impacts on it. So when people are upset about service charges going up, I don't quite... It depends how they perceive it, isn't it? It depends if they perceive it as a transactional service and they want to get something out of it. But it has to go up to keep up with it. Otherwise, your properties may not maintain value, which is not ultimately, it's not our only goal, but it's a large part of it, trying to maintain value. So not increasing, you may decrease your value. I've got some blocks which are in a particularly difficult state, and they're investing a lot of money to maintain their current value as opposed to trying to improve upon it, which obviously in a perfect world they would get to. But it's, This document, just to help sort of focus people in terms of doing that and what they need to do, I think it's really useful for it. Some of the fees, like professional fees, increasing huge amounts as well. That's, again, Building Safety Act coming in. People are having to have more assessments coming in. places might not know what they need, so they might need to get
Exactly,
solicitors' advice on what they need to do, because there are more implications if they get things wrong. On-site staffing costs increasing by 37%. That one actually surprised me somewhat. You don't get too many buildings on an average portfolio that has caretakers and things like that. But the ones that you do have, they're going to need additional training. We've got a property in Tunbridge Wells where the on-site manager needed additional training things because they've got additional requirements as part of all the extra things that come on board.
Health and safety stuff, yeah.
It's it's
I'd
all
be-
needed things.
But back to your comment about looking after your asset and the rest of it, I would be interested, and I may do this myself, do like a mini study against like actually how much your asset has increased versus the increase in the service charge. Because although the increase in the service charge is like, say, gone up by 30%, if your property value, say, 2019, one bed flat might have been worth in the southeast, for example, maybe, I don't know, 140 or something like that, top of my head. It's now worth knocking on like probably 180, 190. So you've increased in £40,000 worth of equity in your property over that period of time. So although it's a bit doom and gloom because of this, you have to remember that we've gone through like quite a big cycle of that. So anybody that is perhaps a property owner will have benefited on the flip side in the increased value of their property. And I know they've kind of plateaued or maybe even come down a little bit from that, but they've not gone back down to like 2019 prices.
No.
So you've kind of benefited a bit from that.
I think that would be a good study, and I think an additional layer to that as well would be to see if places that contribute more to, say, their reserve fund or something before 2019 had a higher increase as well, because that would suggest that they've been able to invest more into their property during that entire period too. I think that would be
I think a lot of people don't believe that the fact of buildings well maintained makes much material difference on the end price that they sell it for. And I would strongly disagree. If you're going to purchase a building, especially if you're like a first time buyer or maybe going into the world of leasehold first time, if you can see that there's a healthy reserve, the building's well maintained, the rest of it, that is going to command a higher price than a building that's a bit worn out, no reserve fund or whatever. I know there's an extreme level, like you could have a massive reserve fund or just a sufficient one. Maybe having a massive one's not going to return you the same value on your sale price, but having a well-maintained property with a good, healthy reserve fund with a plan in place is so much more valuable if you want to get sort of top dollar for your property if you're going to sell it.
Definitely. I think, again, another good statistic and an interesting one in this one, which I was actually surprised about, is that contributions to reserve funds have increased by 34% as well. So that's quite a lot. I think maybe this, whilst it's been a difficult period, I think it's maybe... this shows it's helped people to focus on the long-term plan as well.
Yeah,
like 34%. That's a significant increase to reserve contributions. I've definitely witnessed on the ground floor lots more clientele being more interested in 5-year maintenance plans, 10-year maintenance plans, and introducing reserve funds, especially where costs have increased. Those that perhaps haven't increase their budgets in line with that. They've had to eat into the reserves, so now they're low again, so they're having to rethink about it.
It's strange, that stuff, because I think back to, I mean, obviously I'm a bit older than you, but the financial crash, having lived through probably similar age to you when that happened to me, people tended to lean more towards wanting to know where they stood with things, which matches your feeling of the reserve fund being an important thing and people wanting to plan, because they, for the most people, realise that they need to maintain their property and they've got to put money in the pot. You're kind of average person. But that average person also doesn't want to be lumbered with big bills. So they're very pro planning so that they know where they stand. And that was the same kind of 2009 through to 2013, 14, I'd say, where people wanted to really plan in advance what was going to happen.
Yeah, I think definitely seems to be coming around to that again now, I think, which is
sentiment in the market.
yeah, repeating patterns. But,
yeah, definitely. It's an interesting document. I mean, we've got a newsletter or a blog post out on our website if anybody would like to go and check that out, which references this and is actually a link back to it if you want to peruse all of the various pages in your own time. But I suppose just to wrap up the podcast here, is there any sort of tips that you can give residents or directors, do you think, that would help assist with keeping the budget down? So obviously you've got your tips and tricks, but you've got to work with those clients to get something to it. So any kind of tips or anything that you can think of?
I think one of the things I've been recommending more and more recently is to try and get more regular routine maintenance into your budgets. Try to get the regular roof clearances, trying to inspect your roof to predict what's going to happen going along the line, doing your drainage, because it can stop that sudden sudden unexpected large bill when things eventually go wrong because you've got a blockage somewhere. A little bit of investment now can help prevent a lot more later. And
preventative maintenance.
Preventative maintenance, being more proactive about things. Was it a stitch in time saves 9? That's the phrase.
I think so, yeah.
Or something like that. Cringe. but it's honestly, it's true though. Putting a little bit more and spending a bit more now can prevent a bit more later. And I've definitely seen that in a lot of properties.
Prevention is better than cure.
Yeah,
That's the other one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit more like I'm being a doctor though.
Not quite.
Anything else at all? And anybody key takeaways? I mean, reviewing your prices always comes up a lot from clients, isn't it? Making sure that you're getting, because you're going to have the same cleaner for like 10 years just because you like Fred the cleaner. You might want to review that.
Retendering, just going through a retendering process can be useful. There's obviously a relationship there that you want to keep in mind as well with retaining people. That can be sensible. I think just being on it with your budgets, review it every year, anticipate increasing at least by inflation, trying to anticipate what's going to come up, and just being proactive.
I always liked when I did this job, and I always liked the don't sign up for 10-year contracts with like lift manufacturers and intercom people, because in the small print there's inflationary increases anyway, and over a long period of time. I mean, I don't know. Maybe whether they still do these or not. But back in the day, they used to be able to have an intercom system installed for free, but then you would pay a really high service contract for it, and you'd be stuck in for 10 years. But you'd end up paying for the intercom system like 9 times over. Yeah,
you definitely do. I've seen that with lift contracts as well. Those are definitely better to pay in one go for the installation and then go into a contract after. I've got a large building down in Kemp Town where they've got that exact thing with their intercom, and they're paying £400 every quarter. They're paying £1,200 a year for this intercom, which probably cost in reality $3,000 to put in. They've got another 4 years on it. And
it's probably 5 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's getting starting to get on. So it's frustrating. But
Okay. Well, I think that's been really useful. Hopefully people have had a good takeaway from that. As I say, we've got the blog post out, which has got a signpost to this document and our kind of thoughts in writing. And thank you very much for your insight and the rest of it. And I wish you all the best for budget season, which is currently upon us now. So we do budgets. Everyone else does Christmas, but that's the way we roll. So
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
No problem.
Cheers.